Just outside a quiet rural town, there is a narrow stretch of road that looks completely ordinary during the day. A simple two-lane strip of pavement cutting through farmland and woods, the kind of road people drive without even thinking about it. But if someone stands there late at night, long after the farms have gone dark and the town is quiet, they might notice something strange. Every once in a while, a car will approach from the highway, slow down slightly as it reaches the turn, and then for no clear reason the driver will hesitate for a moment before turning around and choosing the longer route home. What most outsiders do not realize is that the people who live there learned a long time ago that driving down that road after sunset has a habit of ending very badly. Over the years, several people entered that stretch of road late at night and were simply never seen again. Their cars never found, their phones never used again, and the stories about what might be waiting down there after dark became something the town quietly agreed not to talk about too much. The strange part is that years later, when someone finally tried to investigate what really happened to those missing drivers, they discovered something disturbing that had been hidden for decades. Before we start, please subscribe if you haven't already. The town itself was small and quiet, the kind of place where most families had known each other for generations and where very little ever seemed to change. A handful of farms surrounded the center of town. There was a grocery store, a mechanic shop, a church, and a diner that opened early in the morning for farmers who wanted coffee before sunrise. People there lived simple lives and most evenings followed the same slow rhythm, with porch lights turning on one by one as the sun disappeared behind the tree line and the roads gradually becoming empty. There was only one place people avoided talking about openly, and that was a road locals simply referred to as Briar Hollow Road. During the day, Briar Hollow Road looked harmless, almost boring. It began just outside town near an old grain silo and stretched through several miles of farmland before entering a thick area of woods that had grown untouched for decades. Eventually, the road connected with a highway on the other side of the forest, which meant it could cut nearly 20 minutes off the drive for anyone heading toward the neighboring county. Because of that shortcut, newcomers often used it without thinking, but the people who had grown up in the town almost never did, especially after dark. For many years, most outsiders believed that was just an old rural superstition, the kind of local rumor that exists in nearly every small town. Some people said the road was haunted, others claimed drivers sometimes saw someone standing in the woods near the pavement who disappeared when headlights reached them, and a few older residents quietly mentioned that strange lights sometimes moved through the trees late at night. Most people assumed those stories were exaggerated. What made the situation different, and what slowly turned those rumors into something far more unsettling, was the fact that several people who drove that road after dark simply vanished. The first disappearance happened decades earlier, back when the town was even smaller and Briar Hollow Road was mostly used by farmers transporting equipment between fields. One night, a man named Douglas Harper left a bar in the neighboring county and decided to take the shortcut home. His truck was last seen turning onto Briar Hollow Road sometime around 11:30 at night. He never arrived home. At first, people assumed he had crashed somewhere along the road, perhaps sliding into the ditch or hitting a tree in the darkness. But when deputies searched the entire stretch the next morning, they found nothing. There were no tire marks leaving the pavement, no broken branches, no damaged guardrails, and no sign that any vehicle had left the road at all. It was as if the truck had simply disappeared while driving straight ahead. The search lasted several days, but nothing was ever found, and eventually the case went cold. For a long time, the town treated it as a tragic mystery, something unfortunate but not necessarily connected to the road itself. Then a second person vanished almost 15 years later. This time it was a young woman named Erica Shaw who had recently moved to the town to work at the local school. One evening, she visited a friend in the neighboring county and left around 10:45 to drive back home. She used Briar Hollow Road because it appeared on her map as the fastest route. Her car was seen by a gas station camera turning onto the road shortly before 11. After that, there was nothing. When she did not arrive home, people once again searched the entire area, including the woods on both sides of the road, and once again there was no evidence of a crash or struggle. Her car was never found. By that point, the rumors about Briar Hollow Road started spreading more seriously among the townspeople. Older residents began quietly warning younger drivers not to use the road after sunset, especially when traveling alone. Parents told their children to take the longer route through the main highway, even if it meant adding time to their drive. But the warnings were rarely explained in detail. Most people simply said something vague like, that road's not right at night. Years passed again without incident, and eventually some people started believing the stories were nothing more than exaggerated coincidences. Then another driver disappeared. This time it happened to a delivery driver passing through the area late at night. His company's GPS records showed that he entered Briar Hollow Road a little after midnight while trying to reach the highway faster. The tracking signal stopped halfway through the wooded section. When authorities arrived the next morning, they again found nothing, not even tire tracks leading into the trees. 3 disappearances connected to the same road began to attract more serious attention, and eventually a state investigator was assigned to review the cases. The investigator, a quiet and methodical man named Daniel Mercer, approached the situation without believing in supernatural explanations. He assumed there had to be something physical along the road that people were missing, perhaps a sinkhole hidden in the woods or an abandoned structure where vehicles could somehow end up. But as he began speaking with locals, he noticed something unusual. Most people were hesitant to discuss Briar Hollow Road at all. Some changed the subject quickly, others gave vague answers that avoided details, and a few older residents simply said they had been told since childhood never to drive that road at night. Eventually, Mercer spoke with an elderly farmer who had lived near the woods for nearly 60 years. The farmer explained something that had not been included in the official reports. According to him, the strange events connected to that road actually started long before the first recorded disappearance. Back in the 1930s, there had been a small settlement deep in those woods, a cluster of cabins occupied by several families who lived off the land and kept mostly to themselves. The settlement was isolated, rarely visited by people from town, and many locals described the residents as strange and secretive. Then one winter, the settlement was suddenly abandoned. When people eventually walked into the woods to investigate, they found the cabins empty, with belongings still inside as if the residents had left in a hurry. No one knew where they had gone. For decades, the remains of those cabins slowly collapsed and disappeared into the forest, eventually becoming overgrown and forgotten. Mercer initially dismissed the story as irrelevant local folklore, but the farmer added one detail that made him reconsider. The old settlement, according to the farmer, had been located somewhere near the center of the wooded section of Briar Hollow Road. That information led Mercer to examine old maps of the area, and after several days of research, he discovered that the settlement had indeed existed, although records about it were extremely limited. What he did find suggested something unsettling. The families who lived there had belonged to a small religious group that believed certain places in the wilderness contained openings to what they described as the deeper world beneath the ground. Their writings spoke about rituals performed in isolated areas of forest, where they believed communication with unseen forces could occur. According to historical notes, local authorities once investigated the group after hearing reports of unusual nighttime gatherings deep in the woods, but the investigation ended when the entire settlement vanished without explanation. At first, Mercer believed the group had simply relocated somewhere else. But while walking along Briar Hollow Road one afternoon, examining the wooded area where the GPS signal had stopped during the delivery driver's disappearance, he noticed something hidden several yards into the trees. The ground there looked slightly different. Instead of the natural, uneven forest floor, there was a wide circular patch of earth where the soil appeared darker and strangely compacted, almost like the remains of an old excavation site that had long since been covered again. When Mercer stepped closer, he felt something unsettling. The forest was quiet, but the silence seemed unusually heavy, the kind that made every small sound stand out sharply. He later described feeling a strong sense that the ground beneath that circular patch was not solid in the normal way. After reviewing older geological records, Mercer discovered something that finally explained what had been happening. Decades earlier, during the time when the strange settlement existed, there had been a large natural cavern system beneath that exact section of forest. The caverns were unstable and dangerous, and at some point a major collapse had occurred underground. What Mercer believed had happened was far more disturbing than a simple sinkhole. The religious group living there had likely discovered the cavern entrance and used it as the center of their rituals, believing it connected to something spiritual beneath the earth. At some point, the cavern partially collapsed, creating a massive hidden void beneath the forest floor. Over the decades, the surface above that void slowly weakened. Eventually, the road was built directly over it. During the day, the ground remained stable enough for traffic to pass safely. But at night, when fewer vehicles used the road and the surrounding air cooled, the soil shifted slightly, creating a rare but dangerous condition where sections of the pavement could suddenly give way without warning. Mercer believed that on a few isolated nights, when the underground cavity shifted just enough, vehicles driving through the area were essentially swallowed into the hidden cavern below. The road would settle again afterward, covering any obvious signs of collapse. That explanation seemed logical at first, but when engineers were sent to survey the location, something unexpected happened. Ground scanning equipment detected the cavern exactly where Mercer predicted, but the void beneath the surface was far larger than anyone expected, extending deeper than the scanners could fully measure. What disturbed the engineers most was that parts of the cavern appeared to contain large metallic shapes scattered along the floor. The shapes were consistent with vehicles. When investigators attempted to send a remote camera into the cavern through a drilled shaft, the device briefly transmitted a blurry image before the signal cut out. The image showed the twisted outline of several vehicles lying at the bottom of the cavern, confirming Mercer's theory about the disappearances. But there was one more detail in that image that investigators could not explain. Near the vehicles, standing in the darkness of the cavern, there appeared to be several tall, narrow shapes arranged in a circle around them. At first, analysts believed they were broken rock formations or fallen tree trunks. But after enhancing the image repeatedly, they noticed something unsettling. The shapes looked too symmetrical, almost like figures standing upright in the darkness far below the road. The drilling operation was halted shortly afterward due to safety concerns about further collapsing the cavern, and the road itself was permanently closed and rerouted. Locals were told that unstable ground conditions made the road unsafe. Most people in town accepted that explanation, but some of the investigators who studied the final camera image quietly pointed out one detail that was never included in the official report. One of the shapes in the cavern appeared to be slightly blurred, as if it had moved during the brief moment the camera transmitted its image. And if that observation was correct, it meant that the vehicles resting deep beneath Briar Hollow Road might not have been the only things still down there in the darkness.